Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I recommend for the most of you today to listen only to the first part of the video because in the second part I will go absolutely wild. I have things to say and it's definitely not going to be for everyone. But talking about what's happening on the front lines right now, the most notable thing that we all heard from the Ukrainian side what happened is this area here, which is south of Bakhmut. Around Klishivka and Andriivka. This is where we used to getting news from. But now, if we go a little bit south, you will see that this line over here has been like deep red color, mostly because this is where the line also since 2014 has established itself. And what we've heard recently is that Ukrainians suddenly, surprisingly for Russians, were able to break through that line and gain some territory around the area where another of those terracons that we discussed couple of weeks ago, which is like a man-made hills of different slag and waste. And Ukrainians were able to enter, take those parts of, establish themselves in those areas and scare the shit out of Russians because of that. They were crying on their Telegram channels. However, the best part to assess this situation, while it's positive and everything, and I think it's an interesting direction, it's definitely gonna challenge some Russians knowing that Ukrainians are crossing lines that were established since 2014 just suddenly and easily. What we need to see here is the satellite map, because what is here is a huge agglomeration, I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, a huge urban landscape. So while Ukrainians maybe have advanced a little bit in this area, a lot of the misunderstood situation saying, oh my God, Ukrainians are attacking in directions towards Horlivka. Horlivka is not a small village. It's a huge urban landscape. This is not an easy target. There is no easy penetration, no easy going. So hold your horses there, cowboy. But other than that, it's very nice to see that Ukrainians are also performing certain offensive actions. Because Russians right now have decided to activate everything that they have. This is done in twofold. Firstly, Russians right now have some operations ongoing. One operation that is ongoing is the attack around Avdiivka, which is about the same, and we're going to go in details just a little bit. But secondly, right now, Russia has been regrouping around the Kherson area where Ukrainians were holding the bridgehead and trying to expand it significantly. And now they've regrouped, they've prepared the forces, and they counterattacked Ukrainians. And we're going to go discuss it in details. Beyond that, they're trying to achieve two goals because they engaged also their forces to start attacking actively in the Kupiansk direction. They started actively attacking in Liman direction, and there is also news that they're also attacking actively both in Vuhledar and also in Robotina direction. So some of the things that you might hear. All of these where I drew the lines, those are secondary attacks. They are there just to bind Ukrainian units, to make sure that Ukrainian units are engaged, and to try to prevent those two major and minor, let's put it this, is a big major around Avdiivka and a minor around Kherson area operations. The other ones are just there to take away from Ukrainian forces so they cannot concentrate on these. Secondly, what I also heard from the analysts they're saying is that they're looking at the situation that is developing right now in Western powers, where there is a little bit of uncertainty with regards to deliveries of weapons to Ukraine. And Russia is thinking, well, if we can right now put a lot of pressure for Ukraine, required that Ukraine expends a lot of resources and there is nothing in the pipeline, well, then we might get the upper hand and Ukraine will not get supplies of resources. So it's a possibility, it's a window of opportunity. That's another analysis that I've heard, and we're going to talk about this more in the second part. But coming into Avdiivka, what is happening here? The hottest direction here is Stepo. To put it in a perspective, Russians are trying to achieve two goals in this area that you need to know. One is trying to get to Orlivka, which will prevent Ukrainians to supply the resources to Avdiivka. So essentially, it will cut out the resource supply to Avdiivka. And second, Russians are trying to get this chemical factory over here, which is a major fortified position, and it would allow Russians to essentially enter and hit Ukrainian defenders in Avdiivka from the back, which is not good. And this is probably two most critical points on this map. So right now, Russians are trying to establish themselves in Stepo, which is, again, important, but not critical. They're able to move past the railway. So far, there are reports that they're able to reach some certain outskirts of Stepo, but it is not going easy. It is not going very well for Russians. And we can see that really well, specifically from the Russian numbers of casualties. If we just look at the number of casualties that Russians are having in the latest days, they're beyond crazy. They are skyrocketing. It is due to the fact that Russians started their massive offensive all across the front lines, but you might also notice the huge increase in the artillery system. This has been going on for a while now, and we all were discussing, well, what are these artillery systems? What is actually counted in there? Because it's good to know what does this number represent. And from my information that I was able to find out, everything in that number is included is all the artillery systems, which is 82 millimeter howitzers and above. 82 millimeters mortars and above. So all of the towed howitzers, all of the self-propelled howitzers, etc. So this gives us a little bit of perspective, and majority of that number increase is due to the big howitzers being destroyed in Russians. However, there's a lot of howitzers, not howitzers, but there's a lot of mortars that Russia still has. So we definitely should be aware that this number unfortunately doesn't fully represent just the towed artillery or self-propelled artillery. It's a huge number nonetheless. The second big development in the situation is around the Kherson front line. Here, the situation was actually worse for Russians than what was reported, because Russians reported themselves that this road that I was explaining was very crucial for them was already cut by Ukrainians. This road is not actively being used by Russians. And Russians understood that, so that meant that Ukrainians not only took over Krynki, they were able to establish themselves in the forest deep enough so they cut the connection, at least maybe approached very closely the road to at least use maybe small arms or smaller artillery that is able to pretty much destroy any vehicles that are moving along this road, which prevents logistics, which prevents a movement of forces. Since then, we knew that Russia was sending in reinforcements into the area. Most of those reinforcements got destroyed. Most of those quick attempts of Russians, let's just go and kick Ukrainians out, failed. They sustained significant casualties, and they were forced to fall back. Since then, General Teplinsky, that is right now the operating in this area, they ordered Russians to regroup, stop a lot of these assaults, to try to still fix Ukrainians and don't allow them to advance. But since then, they were preparing at least units from 2 brigades. However, I don't know the actual number. It was listed as 2 brigades, but 2 brigades, it's like not full brigades. It's elements from 2 brigades, which means it can be anything. But let's just say it's certain number of troops. And they were able to prepare a certain number of troops with certain number of supplies. And they started this offensive operation into the forest of Krynki. We've seen videos of some certain Ukrainian captured troops. Some people made a big deal out of it, but to be honest, capturing of troops, either Russians capturing Ukrainians or Ukrainians capturing Russians, is just a daily occurrence, so it's nothing special there. If we just seen a video, well, maybe Russia thought it's a great propaganda victory for themselves or something like this. But generally speaking, Ukrainians have acknowledged that the Russians were able to push them a little bit back from the road. So potentially Russians were able to deblock this road. However, Ukrainian presence is still existing on this area of the map. They're still operating actively in other places. We know around Aleshki right now there are reports that something is going on. So Ukrainians are still very, very active. Right now, they would need to hold on against this Russian offensive, the Russian attack. After that, we might see either additional expansions or additional breachheads appear on this front line. Again, I still think that Ukrainians are not fully committing here. I still believe that they are trying to assess whether or not it is really possible to get a proper control of this area. That's it for today's map update. If you were here just for that, the first topic is that Biden met with Xi. And since then, people were very surprised that Chinese delegation didn't say that they changed their stance on the war. I don't really think it was a major topic of their discussions. China has been very neutral in that position, and I think that's the expected position. So I'm not completely sure why certain people were expecting that China suddenly either becomes pro-Ukraine or something. I think that's a little bit too high expectation. China right now is in their survival mode. They need to get their economy together, and it was very clearly seen by Xi just wading in on the points, saying, yes, economy, we need to keep our trade going because China's economy is pretty screwed. But obviously the main point of discussion today is what every Russian propagandist is yelling out loud on their channels, is that the West cannot get their shit together. Be it either the US that cannot just get the voting on support for their military allies, not even just Ukraine, but even Israel through, which is wild for me. And now apparently it's not going to be done before the 28th of November, before Thanksgiving. And then later on, potentially, it's even going to go until February, which is even more crazy for me. Or the second part is that EU cannot figure out what to do with Orban, cannot finally make any decisions about potentially that there shouldn't be unanimity to decide their external policy, and potentially, but just maybe, they should get the economic sanctions that they accepted to work. Specifically also, not just getting the sanctions to work, and we're going to touch on that a bit, but also try to implement sanctions that are as obvious as ever. There is a discussion about the 12th package of sanctions. And the 12th package of sanctions supposedly, just supposedly, is going to include machine tools, like big machine tools that Russia is using to produce, hold it, artillery shells and other weapon components. And you might think, oh, Russia have their own machining tools. No. Russia almost completely depends on the European Union and other Western powers to supply high-end, high-precision machining tools. They are extremely dependent. Russian even economy, they're stating that even with the import, they're just barely supplying about 1/3 of what they need to be supplied in those machining tools. Because a lot of machining tools, Russia just doesn't produce. They don't have precise machinery. They don't have the engineering capacity. They don't have support. So why, I want you to answer me, why we are discussing 2 years, almost 2 years in a war, that we maybe shouldn't supply machining tools that Russia is using to produce weapons. Can someone explain to me how are we here 2 years in? And beyond that, the sanctions that are being implemented and not being monitored. In the last month or even couple of months, we know that there has been EU, US, we set out that Russian oil shouldn't be sold at certain level of pricing. In the last couple of months or even 3 months, not a single shipment of Russian oil was sold, important, below the set level, below the level. So oil that Russia is exporting through European Union's waters, through the pipes of the European Union, any other channels, they are being sold higher than the set maximum price by the European Union. How are we here 2 years in? How are we still not getting our shit together about this? Obviously, certain things are happening. I'm really happy that it's happening. I'm happy to hear that Germany is increasing the support for Ukraine. I'm happy to hear that generally within EU we have the understanding that Ukraine needs to win the war. But what I need to underline is that nothing is written in stone. I truly believe with all my heart in the victory of Ukraine, because most of it I took the Ukrainians' warriors' philosophy and positions. Any kind of shit can happen in the world. Anything can happen. What is important is to do your job every day, like a job. You wake up, you do your shit, you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, you continue doing the stuff. That's how Ukrainian warriors fight. So for me, it's my channel. I'm supporting Ukraine. I'm getting some monetization from this channel. I'm trying to motivate you, and we are getting deliveries to Ukraine. So right now, the latest delivery that we did was with cardinal birds. In the end, because of the supply shortages of thermal drones, we weren't able to get 4 of them. So instead, we will get 2 thermal drones, and I believe it's 7 normal drones. So we are doing our part. How come a shitty-ass YouTuber and a bunch of people that are passionate can do that, can wake up and do their job, but our whole powers, our whole politicians find more time to waste instead of acting on their own decisions that they said. They said we're going to implement ceiling of the price for oil. Good. Have we imposed it? No. Only now. Only now. It's been a year. Denmark is like, and thanks Denmark, of course, we will check Russian ships before they go through our waters, that they have fulfilled the requirements and that the oil has not been sold higher than the maximum ceiling, the maximum level of oil. A year in, European Unions, we're gonna produce 1 million shells for Ukraine. December, almost December coming in. Well, you know, we're about 30% of what we said. Wow. And then some of the German, I believe it's the defense minister says, oh, it was too ambitious of a target. Bitch, if it's too ambitious, if I would work at my job a 30% efficiency, I would be out. How far and how deluded you need to be from reality to state we're going to produce X and then make a wet fart with 30%. Look, everyone wants Ukraine to win. I'm hoping at least for that. Majority, definitely. And we are here doing a lot of blah blah. Mostly politicians are doing a lot of blah blah about whether or not the offensive of Ukraine was successful, whether or not Ukraine was able to get this, whether or not the Ukrainian crossing of Dnipro is going to lead to something. What I'm asking is, can we do our fucking job? Can we, when we say we're going to deliver 1 million artillery shells, actually try to deliver it and not like a wet fart of 30%? Can we say when we're going to impose sanctions, we are actually imposing the sanctions? Can we consider that delivering machining tools for a country to produce weapons is maybe not the wisest solution before 2 years have passed? I have no doubt that Ukraine will win, because wars is a fight of wills, is who has the strongest will. And we see that in Russia, the wills are already being a little bit shaken. It's a topic for another time. But while I'm not expecting anything from Russians, what I do know is that Ukrainians are rock solid. They have the proper approach. They wake up every day and they do their job. The soldiers wake up every day, they see enemy, they fight enemy, they die. Hardest conditions ever. Why cannot we do it? What I know for sure is that this channel is doing its job, and I'm hoping to do more of it. I want to thank everyone that is watching this far. I want to thank everyone that is supporting Ukraine. Slava Ukraini, guys. Keep strong. I love you, and I'll see you next time.